So there were three different topics that we really looked at focusing on within that survey. And one of them was around the importance of candidate-centric hiring approaches. Was that really important to the candidate, to the overall organizational process? The second thing would be around the adoption of innovative tools and technologies within the selection process. And the last is really around how organizations are using artificial intelligence and machine learning and how that's changing the overall landscape of what we're doing today. So we surveyed over 3,100 HR professionals from every region in the world, small to mid-sized organizations, as well as large multinationals. And we asked them about every facet of the talent assessment and their overall strategy. So how they're using talent data and analytics, thinking about what types of assessments they're using, and of course, what types of technology they're using within the process. Overall, it's really around our clients are thinking about how they can evolve and improve the candidate experience. And so that's really what we wanted to focus on in asking them questions about what they're doing and how they are conveying their employer brand. It's definitely still a work in progress around that overall experience for the candidate. So if you think about what organizations are doing, within the survey, over 2/3 talked about the fact that they're going to be investing within their overall employer brand. But of those, only a quarter of them are ultimately thinking about candidate preferences when they're thinking about their overall employment brand. And so that's a disconnect between what the employers think they're doing and overall what the candidate's perception could be and what they want to see within the process. It's definitely a miss for organizations because following a negative candidate experience, about 1/3 of those folks are going to tell their friends. Then we know that 12% are going to go out and they're going to be on social media talking about that experience. What's most alarming of all is that 18% of candidates will not purchase a product or service from an organization again if they have a negative candidate experience. So that has a significant impact on someone's business. There are two things that you can think about from a best practice approach in engaging with your candidates. And really the first one is around candidate effort. Nobody likes clicking too many buttons to get to the end of the process. So think about how you can use mobile interfaces and really intuitive different ways of bringing the candidate into the funnel and making it very easy for them to show that they're interested in the job. And then the second part is around transparency. We hear that loud and clear. Candidates want to know what the job's about, what's expected of them, what the communication process is going to look like in timelines, so that ultimately they can feel like they're as much in the driver's seat as possible. What organizations are thinking about when they're looking at streamlining the candidate process, as well as making it more efficient for their recruiters, is how they can adopt innovative tools and technologies like asynchronous interviews and games and puzzles to engage candidates. And that's something that we've been hearing a lot about, is that whole idea of gamification in the process. So we surveyed everyone and asked them about what are their adoption rates of those types of tools and technologies. Only 13% of organizations were using asynchronous video interviews, and 3/4 of respondents had no intention of using them at all. When you looked at games and gamification, it's pretty much the same story. Only 15% of organizations were using those types of tools within the assessment process, and 7 out of 10 had no plans to use them. The great thing is the tried and true methods that organizations have been using for years still continue to play out in terms of what they're using today. So the three most common assessments that organizations are using, there's skills and job knowledge. That's being used by 67% of organizations. Then personality assessments are being used by 60%, and then our good old cognitive assessments are being used by 55% of organizations. On the flip side, what's really interesting is when you bump that up against what candidates prefer. Candidates prefer personality assessments as well as assessments that give them a good idea of the job or skills required. And that goes back to the earlier point that I talked about with transparency in the process. When you're helping candidates really understand what's going to be expected of them, it makes them feel more like they're in the driver's seat. So ultimately, the key takeaways around the use of technologies right now is that organizations are still using the same types of assessments that they've been using for the last 3 to 5 years, and those continue to prove to be valuable in the process, and candidates appreciate them. Emerging technologies are just that. They're still emerging, but we're not quite sure about the link between necessarily their predictive nature of that and job performance. But I think what is valuable around the technologies that are coming out today is that they are providing that positive candidate and engaging experience for them and giving transparency into what's expected of them. So I think we'll continue to see more of that in the future. It's a fascinating trend around how to use artificial intelligence and machine learning within a selection context. So when you think about what artificial intelligence and machine learning are, it's developing an algorithm, and the algorithm is the way that a computer will interpret and analyze data. And in this specific context, it's around looking at individual candidate data. So looking at the adoption rate of things like artificial intelligence and machine learning, they were being used by 13% of respondents in our survey, with it being slightly higher for the Fortune 500. There's about 22% of respondents from the Fortune 500 who are utilizing those types of artificial intelligence and machine learning. Now, when you think about it, though, what's really key is that of those respondents who are using artificial intelligence and machine learning, only about 46% of them are specifically tying that to a metric or a business outcome. Otherwise, it's very much in an experiential type phase and really looking to learn what they can, I think, using that for hopefully data analytics in the future. When we're thinking about best practices around utilizing algorithmic assessment, one of the do's is that there isn't a one-size-fits-all type of approach to utilizing this type of data. So from a candidate perspective, this allows you to look at candidate data very early in the process and understand a metric like someone's likelihood to stay in the role. And we can do that right from someone's resume data. So that's a data point that could be considered if that is a business need or an objective that you're looking to solve for. So really understanding what you're trying to solve for ahead of time is going to be critically important when you're looking at implementing that type of algorithmic assessment. And when you think on the other side, on the don't side, it's really just the inverse of that. You can throw a lot of data at someone and you're bound to find some type of correlation between a data point and something like job performance. But you really want to understand what you're trying to solve for before you start doing that, so you're getting the right metrics in play and you're really understanding the right profile of candidate when you're looking at this type of data. So these were just some high-level findings from our 2017 Global Assessment Trends Report. And if folks would like to see the entire report and read it in its entirety, you can go ahead and visit our website and download the full report there.